What is the smallest thing that I can build that will enable me service this customer? Now, it doesn't have to be like a fully fleshed out product. It could be a process that you run manually. But the main important thing you want to focus on is to learn as you solve the problem.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the Okwera podcast, aka T.O.P, where we're elevating you to the top. I'm your host, Justina Kanza. We've got some exciting guests for you today. I hope you stick around to the end and catch you soon. If you're anything like me, you're ever bursting with lots of ideas, lots of initiatives, lots of innovations, but it's sometimes very challenging to get that idea into, turn it into a product, turn it into a service, turn it into a venture, especially using design thinking, especially using a playbook that works really well and effectively. And so today I'm excited to be joined by Adeyinka, aka Yinka. Thank you for being here with me.
I'm very happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, Yinka, starting off the top, just walk us through a little bit of your journey over the past 7 years and the different ventures you've built and also the work you're doing at the Black Innovation Zone at DMZ.
Okay. So I'm going to go back a little longer than 7 years.
Absolutely.
I started off my journey while I was in university studying engineering. I had this dream to become an electrical engineer. But while I was in school, I discovered graphic design and very quickly went on to start a design company. That was the first company that I started. The second company I started was a t-shirt making company because I was part of an organization that needed t-shirts. And I was like, I'll do it by myself. And I did it. And that was the second company. We went on to have quite a lot of success growing the business and doing work for multinationals and other organizations within Nigeria where I lived at the time. And so that was my second venture. And that was kind of like the introduction into entrepreneurship and being able to create value for people that you serve. The second piece was when I graduated school, I started running my design agency called Creative, and I ran that for a couple of years. That was essentially just working with small businesses, startups, some medium-sized companies, and helping them essentially go from they were usually at the idea stage, and we're helping them with branding and building out their corporate identities and websites. But one of the trends I started to notice was a lot of businesses knew where they wanted to go, but they didn't know how to get there.
Absolutely.
And so they were doing all this branding and doing all these logos and doing websites, when in reality, the products and the services that they wanted to offer, they were unclear about. And so that was the second piece. After doing that for a couple of years, I decided to do a master's program in design management. That was when I pivoted into the innovation sector specifically, which is now I've gone to school, I've learned business, I've learned design thinking practice. Now, how can I use this to support entrepreneurs, just like I was, to deliver value and to capture value effectively? So that was the third piece. In November 2022, I moved to Canada after having worked in the innovation space in Nigeria for 2 years. I moved to Canada and started looking for work. I was very fortunate to have my first job in Canada at Highline Beta, which is a corporate venture studio and VC firm. I was running a couple of corporate accelerator programs there. It really gave me a crash course on innovation in Canada, which was great. And then finally, I had the opportunity to transition to DMZ. I started off as a program lead, which is working with founders within our portfolio and helping them get access to all the resources that the DMZ has. Sometime last year in March, I got promoted to program manager of the Black Innovation Programs. That is all of our programming that the DMZ offers for Black founders and entrepreneurs in Canada and in some ways around the world. So that is essentially the journey, university, through some of the different careers that I've had all the way up to where I am right now.
That is beautiful. And I kept getting it wrong. I kept saying Black Innovation Zone, but the Black Innovation Zone is the coalition of the different Black
Exactly.
accelerators and organizations in the entrepreneurship space. But that's such a beautiful journey. At the heart of it is one, delivering, helping founders deliver product that's relevant to the community they serve.
Exactly.
And another part of it is identifying how to go from 0 to 1. And a lot of us entrepreneurs, I'll tell you this, are confused. I spent the whole year obsessing over the brand colors and working on the website for one of my initiatives. That whole year wasted, first of all. That's not how it should be done, right? We've talked a lot about building an MVP, starting small. So maybe that's our starting point here. What is an MVP? Why does it matter to entrepreneurs? How are they getting started from 0 to 1, leveraging this MVP?
So I know you asked about the MVP,
but there's a step before that.
But I always like to take a step back.
Absolutely.
It's always about what is the problem that I'm trying to solve. Without clarity on the specific problem that I'm trying to solve, there is no premise for a business. Now, so there's no premise for a business. Without a real problem that a group of customers have that they are willing to pay for, then there is no business. That's what a lot of businesses kind of like jump to, a lot of superficial things like logos, branding, websites, when in reality, the first step you need to take when launching your business is, one, if I think I have a problem, I need to validate if this is a real problem. And when I have evidence that there is a small group or there is a group of people who have this problem and it's so critical to them that they are willing to pay for it, then I figure out what is the best way to solve this problem. Because it's not about just offering another solution. It's about offering a better solution, a different approach to solving the problem than the existing alternatives. Once you are able to figure that out mentally, the next step would be, okay, so what is the smallest thing? And remember, I didn't say product. What is the smallest thing that I can build that will enable me service this customer? It doesn't have to be a fully fleshed out product. It could be a process that you run manually. But the main important thing you want to focus on is to learn as you solve the problem for your customers. And what you would find is over time, in the earlier stages of working one-on-one with your customers, you will find that you are learning a lot about how to solve the problem, about the problems they have. You become an expert on the problem. And then you're able to craft creative ways to solve the problems for them. And then once you have a process, meaning you have a step-by-step guide of going from problem to solution, then you can think about, how do I build a product with tech, potentially, that would help me scale my impact? How do I automate this process? And then that's when you need tech. And that's when you begin to think about scaling, and then you think about company building, and so on and so forth. So the MVP is kind of like maybe 3 or 4 steps down the line.
Yeah.
The first thing you want to identify is a problem that needs to be solved by a certain group of people, and that it's a valid, urgent, critical, pressing need that people are willing to pay to solve. And once you do that, you need to figure out what is the actual solution to this problem and to deliver that. And once you're there, then we say, okay.
Absolutely. And that was a trick question, because a lot of founders like me will go straight to, what should we build? Oh, there's this problem that I think exists in the market. Let me build something and just send it out there.
Okay.
But that is beautifully said. Take us back a couple of steps. So identify the problem, map out a potential solution after validating the problem. Going back to that, and also remembering the lean canvas and the solution canvas that we've worked on before.
Yeah.
What are some questions that we're asking ourselves as entrepreneurs during the problem identification and validation stage?
What are the questions to ask to validate your problem? Okay, so the way I would answer this question is, imagine you are speaking to a prospective customer or a user that you think has this problem. The first thing you want to understand is the context in which the problem exists. So the very first thing you want to say is, tell me about your journey. So, for example, if the problem that you think people have is they struggle to find transportation, for example, what you want to understand is the contexts in which this problem exists. So, tell me about the last time you tried to get transportation, or maybe it's transportation for your pet or something like that, right? So, tell me about the last time you went out on a journey with your pet. What they'll tell you is, oh, I remember that morning, this happened, I did this, and I had to wait there. As you're listening to this answer, what you're looking for is the pain point. Like, where were the places where there was a bit of struggle, there was a bit of friction, lack of satisfaction with the outcome, time was being wasted, a lot of money was being spent. You're looking to see, okay, what are all the tension points in the stories? And then once you have a clear idea of what essentially the journey is like, right? Then you would say, what are the ways that you have tried to transport your pet? In this example, it would be. So, what are the options that you have explored? And they'll say, I've tried calling an Uber, but the Uber doesn't let me keep my cat in the cabin. They want to put it in the boot. I also tried buying a bike with a basket. Now, what you're learning is the different ways that they've tried that didn't work for them. And now you know why it didn't work for them. And so you're beginning to have a sense of, what is it that you're trying to achieve? In innovation speak, we call it jobs to be done.
Jobs to be done.
Right? And then what are the pains or what are the obstacles stopping them from achieving that goal? But then beyond that, you're also kind of learning what are the things that matter to them when they think about solving this problem. So it's not just about taking away the pains, but also providing some benefits, right? So to recap, you want to understand the context of the problem. You want to understand how it happens. You understand the attributes, the factors that contribute to this being a problem. You want to understand the pain points, the tensions, the friction in the current point. You want to understand the existing alternatives and why they do not work, right? Once you have all these things, you'll be able to say, okay, now I know all these things. I know what matters to you. I can think about what I can do to solve this problem. When you think about a problem, you must understand, what are they trying to achieve? What stops them from achieving it? What matters to them to solve it? Right? But then you need to understand why it matters to them. There always has to be a bit of that emotional connection. Absolutely. So it's like, why does it matter that you transport your car? Like your cat, like my car's my car. And then because a lot of times purchasing decisions are emotional.
Very emotional.
And in order to understand humans, you must understand the emotions of those humans. So
you can only do that when you talk to them. There is no automating that part of innovation, They're talking to the customer and understanding them.
Exactly. And if I could say something, you said earlier that founders kind of jump straight into building. The reason they do that is because building is easy. Understanding human beings is hard.
Interesting.
Building is tangible. You put an input, you get an output. Understanding, speaking to humans, understanding problems, that is intangible. That is abstract, right? That is amorphous and emotional and messy. And a lot of people who want to start businesses are craftsmen. They want to forge an amazing product. They want to build something beautiful, right? But a lot of people don't realize that this messy front end of venture creation, which is understanding and speaking to users, understanding emotions, reasons why people do things, and human psychology, which is tough for the best of us to master. Like, this is what is most important. Building, we can figure out.
Absolutely, because even if you rush to building and you don't get the basic need from understanding in these conversations, then you're just building in vain.
Exactly.
But I was listening to you speak and listening to you share the questions that entrepreneurs should be asking as part of these initial conversations to understand. What I didn't hear from you was, entrepreneurs saying, what if I created a solution where we fly your cat from this place to that place? How would that make you feel? Would you buy that product? Can you share a little bit more of why we shouldn't be asking these initial questions that way?
At the early stages, you really want the initial conversations with potential customers or people who have the problem to be focused on the problem itself. In design thinking, there's this idea of empathy, almost like putting yourself in the person's shoes. There is a certain type of openness or vulnerability that is unlocked in someone you're having a conversation with when they believe that you are speaking with them just to know them. You're not trying to sell something to them, yeah? Just for their benefit, to understand their life journey, right? And so at the very beginning, in order to understand the problem, you need to take that posture.
Absolutely.
The second piece is you cannot assume that you know the solution to the problem. No matter how much of an expert you are, and there are a lot of examples of experts who came up with solutions that no one used. So you must not assume that you know the answer. Let the users tell you what the problem is, and then almost as if the solution will become apparent as you learn more about the solution. So it's not about pitching your idea, it's about understanding the problem from all the different perspectives and angles. And then once you do that, there is a time when rather than saying what if or hypothetical, you come up with a solution, or what I'll call a solution idea. You give it some type of form that you can use to describe what it will do and what benefit it would create. And then you go back and have a second conversation with that person. Rather than saying what if, you would say, here's an offer. You provide a value proposition. So I have this tool or widget that will help you, in the example I've been using, get your cat from one place to the other in a way that's better than the existing alternative, right? And then the person would say, wow, that's actually perfect. That's what I've been looking for. How do I get access to it? So like, all right, so, and then you make them take some kind of step and make some kind of tangible commitment. But you would notice that there's a difference in that first conversation and the second conversation.
The second one is actually you have an offer in hand and they'll either get it or not.
Yeah,
And that's
so
actual data.
you're not brainstorming with the customers. You are, at this point, having gotten a very clear understanding of what the problem is, and you've brainstormed certain solutions, then you put together a package and then you sell, like you're actually selling it. You say, I have this widget, I have this tool, and then you sell it. And then you would see, it's like, oh, this sounds compelling, or this sounds exactly like something that I've used before. Then we can go back and keep rejigging the offer, because someone doesn't have to see something to buy it.
Absolutely.
Right?
You're a perfect segue to the solution part of the conversation. In my mind, I have like I created a spreadsheet out of the the exercise you made us do last time. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, sheet 1, the lean canvas, problem canvas, we're done. I know all my P's. Sheet 2, we have the problem, the packaging, the promise, the price, and the people too, like all of those things. I remember those. And so onto the solution, as we segue into that, you mentioned identifying what the promise is, right? What is the value proposition that you're offering, and what packaging does it carry? Maybe it's a service, maybe it's a scrappy spreadsheet that does things manually, etc. At this stage, the founders also want to identify what a price is. How do folks go around this? Because I know someone like Kanye West, for example, he just put all his uses at the same price and just let the market tell him how to price which ones were selling more. Like, what are some strategies around that? I think founders, myself included, find it challenging to price products or offerings at the very early stage when you're still validating your idea and your solution.
So what you want to do is, this is, and it could be a controversial take, and it depends on what you're doing. I think the first thing I would like to say is it's important to charge. Don't say, I'll give it for free. Because if someone has a problem that they're willing to pay for, that is the greatest signal or indication that this is a real problem,
Product market fit. Yeah.
right? And when I say pay, a lot of times people might wonder, like, do they have to have paid money? But you could also look at proxies for paying. So if they are spending a lot of time, it takes 60 hours to do something themselves. They are paying in time,
Interesting.
right? So that's one thing. Now, the next thing that you do is if there is some kind of existing alternative that they are able to pay for, that almost sets a benchmark for how much you can charge. If it costs in dollar amounts $20 in the existing way that they try to solve the problem that's inefficient, then that gives you a baseline of what you could charge for something better. Ideally, you want to charge so much more. Ideally, at the very beginning, you want to charge a lot.
A lot more.
A lot more than the alternative, because if someone is able to believe your promise that I can do this for you 5 times better, like I would reduce the amount of times that it takes for you to do this job from 60 hours to 6 hours or 6 minutes. Oh my goodness. That's just a crazy value proposition. And then they're like, yes, I want to pay that. So I already gave a couple of strategies. One, think about what do people pay right now. So in money, in time. All right. So you want to benchmark against them. You can start off there, and then you can always increase or reduce your price. What matters is that people are paying.
That's very important. I think I've seen organizations start off even with just like giving out subscriptions, products for free, but we all like free things. And those are vanity metrics because it doesn't really tell you anything about whether, there's a market for this, when there's a charge attached to it. But one of the things I also do remember as talking about around early adopters and also just making sure that between your service or packaging and promise and the alternative, that yours is doing things significantly better.
Okay. Yes. So in the innovation space, in the startup world, the number is 10x. You have to be doing your solution has to be 10x the alternative. Now, in some cases and in some situations, that is valid. Technology allows you to do things 10x, meaning something that takes 60 hours could take 6 hours, maybe 60 minutes. But there are other cases, for example, Airbnb. When they started off, they could not be 10 times better than the hotel, which was the existing alternative. But they could be different from the hotel. They could be good and different. So that is the thing. So you want to make sure that one, you are solving the problem, but then, and it is significantly, you're effectively solving all the pain points you have identified. One. And then two, when you start thinking about competing with existing alternatives, there needs to be a clear differentiating factor that makes people say, this is a different way of solving this problem. And then they're like, I want to do that. So it's 10x is, like I said, in some cases, you can do things 10x better. In some cases, 100x better. But in some other cases, you can do things 3x better. But then you always want to show that you're different.
You're different. Absolutely.
Does that make
sense? It makes a lot of sense. In my mind, it's very clear. Like you're either 10, 100 times better than what exists, or you're, very unique from what exists. Almost like unique service, unique offering, but still solving the same problem.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so now that we've walked through that journey where people have identified their problems, identified the different pain points, identified the alternatives that exist, etc. On the problem side, on the solution side, they've identified, what the, MVP is, if you will, identified the pricing of it. How do you sell to that first set of 10, 50, 100 customers?
So typically, when you start approaching selling, you want to think about it in orders of magnitude. First, after you've figured out what the problem is, you want to sell to one person. Find one person that fits the early adopter category. And we didn't speak about what the early adopter is, but let me just define it here as the person that is most likely to purchase your product or to switch from an existing alternative to using a new way. That would be someone who is feeling the pinch the most and that you can access.
Someone who's very in love with their cats.
Who, like, their cat is their god.
It's a baby. They dress it up
They
and
dress
everything.
it up, they have all the costumes
Yes.
and so on and so forth. For that person, you've identified the early adopter. You find one person who loves their cat in this example, and then you sell to them. Essentially, what you're doing is one-on-one, because I am a very big advocate of founder-led sales, meaning you as a founder will go and meet this person and say, oh, can I have a conversation with you? I would like to show you something that I have been... I just wanted to give you feedback, because obviously this is probably someone you've spoken with. So I just wanted to give you feedback on the original conversation that we had. And then you would say, oh, what if I could transport your cat in a very fast way, in the most comfortable way, that no discomfort, and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. And the person would say, oh, that sounds really interesting. Tell me more. And then you say, yeah, if you sign up for this service that I'm putting together, then you'll be able to do this. And the person will be like, yeah, where do I sign up? How do I sign up? And then you close that deal. And you say, okay, so all you need to do is just give me a check of $100, and I'll only cash it in 2 weeks when I'm able to finalize my operations. I'll cash that check, and then I'll come pick up your cat. So that's the first conversation you had. The next order of magnitude is like, okay, I need to find 10 more people. Then I'm going to talk to those people one-on-one and sell the same way you do it. And so what you then need is a system, a sales system, a very simple one, right? So you start off with prospecting. So like, okay, I'm going to find 10 people. I'm going to put their name and email, right? I'm going to reach out to them one after the other. I'm going to book times to call, and then I'll speak with them and I'll sell with them. Now, this is a manual and painstaking process of sending each person an email and doing all that. But it's very important because you are learning along the way how to sell, what words to use, how they find it compelling. You also know how easy it is for you to sell. What is the close rate when you sell one-on-one? So is it 50%? Do half of the people say yes? Is it 80%? That in itself is a signal that what you have built works. Because if you have the early adopter segment right, you should be hitting at like 80%. If you are really speaking to a specific problem that someone has, they should be able to say, okay, wow, you like, stop talking, take my money.
If that's not happening, then it's valuable because you're learning something from that not happening.
Exactly. And you're learning that it's either what I'm offering is not compelling or the way I'm offering it is not compelling. All right, so that's 10. And then after you've sold to kind of 10 people, you want to start thinking, what's the next order of magnitude? 100. At this stage, even one-on-one, you can still sell to 100 people. And I have to say, it depends on the type of business you're trying to sell to.
Absolutely.
Typically, if you're selling B2C, it's easier, it's simpler. If it's B2B, it's a little more complex, but it's the same process. It just takes a little longer. That's it. And then you keep working your way up the ladder. Once you start getting to 100, then you need to start thinking about, I've been able to successfully sell to 10 people. I know the language. I know my product is solving a real problem. There's a compelling case here. Then I can take all I've learned to begin to scale my outreach. Then you need to start thinking like, can I build out a list of 100 people? I'll do an email template that goes out to them, and then they book some time. Then you're beginning to automate some of those processes. And then once you've sold to your next 100 customers, in this case, if that's valid for your business model, the next you want to think about is the next 1,000, the next 10,000, the next 100,000, and the next million. And that's how you begin to scale it. But in the first few steps, it's all about the grinding, grueling work of finding one individual and selling to them.
Absolutely. And I like that you have the founder led approach to selling, because one of the questions I had noted here is resource constraints, which a lot of founders face very early on. It's either you're doing it by yourself or you have a couple of folks doing it with you. And so you have to be out there doing it initially. So, how do founders navigate resource constraint in these very early stages outside of, founder led sales, etc.?
So, if I understand the question, a lot of early stage businesses are small. Team of one, team of two, maybe. And there's a ton of work to be done, especially now, maybe when you're thinking about sales. So, how do you, and each person's bandwidth is limited, right?
Absolutely.
How do you manage the fact that you have limited bandwidth?
I think that's one part of it too.
Okay.
And also the other part of it, now that I think of it, is it's so early on. I see founders rushing to getting either co-founders or CTOs. It's because we think we need help, and we do need the help. We need the extra resources, and we're trading in equity because sometimes the cash is in there to pay folks. So how do you navigate both pieces of accessing resources to really build this once it's been validated?
In terms of you having narrow bandwidth, I'll answer that one first. It's just making sure you're focusing on doing the right things, right? So when you should be validating problem, validate the problem. Don't be selling or building. And that way, everyone's effort is focused on that point. You should be doing one thing at a time as a founder. You should be only like validating the problem, or you should be only selling at some point, right? Which is also validating the problem in the solution and the offer at the same time. You should always have such a narrow focus at the early stages. That is the very first thing. You should never be doing everything. And there are trade-offs. For someone who is willing to build, they might decide that, oh, I'm not going to do pitch competitions. I'm just going to really focus on selling because that is the biggest leverage I can build in my business. So that's the first point. The second point then is, how do I go from I validated my problem and solution, right? Now I want to kind of like grow my team so I'm able to do more, right? And then I to answer that, I have a bit of a hot take, which is...
I like hot takes and controversies. I like this.
So my hot take is, you shouldn't grow unless you have to. Innovation and venture creation benefits from having a team. If you have teams that are able to commit and you're able to sell the vision, great. When you want to grow your team in a way that like you have to pay to grow your team, you should only do that when you have reached the limit. For founders, especially the type of founders that I like to support, or the types of founders that I like, you should have a lot of capacity. You should be extremely resourceful. Like you should have done a ton before you think, oh, now I need to go out and hire 3 salespeople, right? My general thinking is, when you have gone through this process and you have sold to 1 person, to 10 people, you're on your way to selling to 100 people, what have you done? At that point, you have a lot of leverage. Why? Because you have traction. You have customers that you can point to, that you've solved your problem. You have some revenue that you've earned. Beyond that, you have all these valuable insights about the problem you're trying to solve, about the space. You've essentially become an expert in this field. At that point, once you've been able to validate that, look, there's a market opportunity beyond this 100 people that I'm selling to, there's 1 million people, well, 100,000 people, 10,000 people that need to be served, but I can't do it on my own. And then at that point in time, 2 answers. At that point in time, it's good to look for help. So it's like, oh, I need 2 other people to join my team so that we can focus on doing this more. Then that's a really good time to consider external funding. And by external funding, I'm not saying VC. It could be,
Everybody loves VC.
Everybody loves VC, but like VC shouldn't be your first source of capital. Actually, your first source of capital should be your revenue. As to the founders that I support, I always tell them, what is the straightest path to getting to operational break-even? from day one, you should be thinking, how long is it going to take us to cover our cost of operation? Just so that we're good. Just and then the point being, let me just go back. The point being that revenue is the most important, cheapest form of capital. But then there's always all these, especially in Canada, there are all these amazing non-dilutive options like grants and pitch competitions, even though pitch competitions could take a lot of time. But grants could be a really good option that could help you. Maybe you bring someone on part-time. The key being, like, don't do more than you have to.
Absolutely.
Right? Always reach the very bottom before you say, okay, I'm going to go do something else. All right? So hopefully I answered the question.
Absolutely. And you answered it beautifully. And for those that are watching, there's another episode on grant writing and tips on other forms of non-diluted funding. So you'll see that on our channel. But part of what I'm hearing, Yinka, is also for me that it's harder actually to sell to your first 10 or 100 because you don't have much traction there. But once you have that, and that's why we're encouraging founders to start there first, it becomes a little bit easier because now you've identified processes that work, you've identified selling language that works, and you have traction to show. My next question, because I know we're very short on time here, is being in love with the problem versus being in love with the solution.
We already kind of touched on this, where
Yes.
it is people being craftspeople and being in love with their ideas because they gave birth to them. The ideas become their babies.
Absolutely.
Right? No one wants to shoot their baby. Right? But like I said, the very, very basic premise for every business is that there is a real problem to be solved by people who are willing to pay for that problem to be solved. And, you know, a lot of people come and say like, oh, I've developed this really amazing technology. Like, let's start from the technology side. It's like, I have this really amazing tool that can do this, right? Then it now becomes another question of like, okay, so this tool can do this, right? Let's find and validate a problem that can be solved really well, maybe 10x well, maybe 100x well. Maybe you've developed a technology that improves the way something is done by 100x, right? But you still need to go through that process of identifying a group of people or a context that could benefit. So loving the problem should always be number one. Even when you grow and you're now like a more mature company, having that focus on the user and on their problem would make sure that even when the customers are changing, the customer segments are changing and their needs are evolving, that you evolve along with them.
Moving with them.
It's a mindset that every single business owner should have.
And a more so rapid fire on this specific point, the art of the pivot, right? How do you pivot, whether it's your solution as those needs are changing, as those customer segments are changing, how do you pivot effectively? How do you pivot fast?
So quick pivot. It's like when you're at the early stages, you validated the problem, now you're selling your solution. Pivots are quick because what you're selling is a pitch. So you go this one, it doesn't work. The next one, you try something else. That's a pivot. The bigger you grow, the bigger the pivot. But when you start with this type of methodology where you're focusing on the problem first and you're selling before you build, then your pivots can be smaller. And when you indeed start building your MVP, then it is like it's smaller manual steps. So you're trying out different things. That's a pivot, right? The only time that you should do a big pivot usually is when, you know, there is enough evidence from the market that there is no need for this. It's like, oh, you thought this was a problem. It's not that much of a problem. Maybe you had this idea, but yeah, it's not. And we're not willing to pay for that. And then you say, okay, let's find another problem. And then you pivot.
That's beautiful. I never thought about it that specific way very early on. If you're selling to 10 people, you sell to the first person and it doesn't stick, try something different with the second person. Like that in itself is a pivot because it's just an MVP or like a packaging that in most cases hasn't even been fully built yet.
There's so much flexibility at those early stages to really come in and try out different things. The main goal, especially in those early stages, is to learn. Every single interaction is to generate new insight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Yinka. Well, with the last few minutes, I'm pushing it, I know.
We could talk for days.
For
This is
days
so
and
much
days,
fun.
absolutely. Well, in the last minute, where do people find you? I know people have a lot of questions. LinkedIn, Instagram, any social medias where people can connect with you and learn from you.
So LinkedIn would be the best place,
Okay.
right? You can search for me on LinkedIn. I am Yinka Adeyinka on LinkedIn. That would be the best place. That's my most active social media. I don't have any other
And it's
social media
beautiful,
actually.
beautiful. And I'll make sure it's tagged in all the different places this podcast is shared. And
Awesome.
then also looking into the camera, one
Yeah.
last word for the founders. If they forget everything else here, what's one thing they should remember?
It's just love the problem. It's understand that at the end, it's a person you are trying to help. It's a person that has a problem you're trying to solve. Empathy for that person makes you a much better problem solver and business person. So that's the one thing, right?
Thank you, Yinka. And thank you,
you.
everybody, for joining us for today's episode. Make sure you drop any comments, any questions in the chat. And thank you to Western Frontlines for sponsoring this episode as well. And until next time, bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm very, very curious to hear from you. So let me know, what did you like about the episode? What resonated for you? What was food for thought for you? And beyond anything, make sure you like, you subscribe, you share this with your friend, because the more people we can get this information and these resources and these stories to, the more we can reach, the more we can impact. And let us know, what other topics do you want to see on the channel? What other guests do you want to interact with through the channel? We hope to hear from you, and until next time, bye.